okay? Shila malo sasana yalahari mayin yabo Ezri mi madino yos hashamayim varetz al yitain lamot raglech al yanum shamrecha hino lo yanum lo yishan shami Yisrael anoi shamrech anoi tzilcha yad minecha yamam hashemesh lo yakech aviyarech balayla anoi yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor es nafshecha anoi yishmor tzeischa vo'ech me'at havayad Allah. Mark, are you finished speaking? I'll speak first and you'll speak. Okay. We're standing in right before Chicago Shavuos, the holiday of Matan Torah. And the custom is these days not to say Tachanun, not to give Hespedim, but a few words we could say about the Niftar, that there are lessons that we can derive from it. Many years ago, at a Beis Avel, a discussion was raised about why is it that mourning for a parent is 12 months and mourning for other relatives was only Shloshim Yom, 30 days. And at that time, Hagon Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, the Rosh Yeshiva Chaim Berlin, he said, because a parent is the link that a person has to Matan Torah, to the giving of the Torah, and to the Sinai experience. And unfortunately, with many people, the link is just a genetic link. However, Mr. Gutman, Zichrono Livracha, the link was much more than just that. And one has to understand, to give over a Torah way of life from one generation to another generation always involves hardships, because the attitudes from one generation to another generation changes. And sometimes it's hard for somebody who was brought up in a previous generation to be able to communicate or to give over to his children who are members of another generation. But in our time, it is much more difficult, because it's not just a question of giving your Torah over from one generation to another generation. It's a question of giving over Torah from one era to another era. When the Jewish people lived in Europe, more or less, there were differences between one generation and the other, but the attitudes were not that different. But the Jew before the war, the Jew during the war, the Jew after the war, and the generations after that, the whole lifestyle of the communities they lived on were altogether different. So the giving over, the perpetuation of the Masorah became doubly difficult. And this was the unique thing. The Torah tells us, Eila told us, Noach is tzaddik tamim haya b'dorosav. He was tamim, complete in all his generations. He lived before the Mabul, before the flood. He lived during the flood, and he lived after the flood. And Mr. Gutman was born before the flood of fire. He lived during the flood of fire. And he came to America, and the attitudes were one attitude, and then years later it changed to another attitude. But the Masorah that he gave over remained the same. And the question is, how was he able to do it? And the answer is, he was able to do it because he didn't just teach with his words of his mouth and what he said, or what he, so to say, lectured his children. He did it by his personal example. Torah says about Avram Avinu, he commands his children after him. After him doesn't only mean after he's passed away. After him also means after him by his example. When one teaches by example, then that's a lesson that remains after the person is gone, because to a certain degree that person is never gone. He remains alive with his descendants. And if there was a person who taught by example, it was Mr. Gutman. His devotion is well known. I didn't know him in the earlier years, but I heard about his devotion to his mother when his mother had to be in a nursing home. See, he would go every day, and Shabbos he would walk miles in order to feed her. And it was the same devotion that he showed to his wife. And it was this devotion that he showed to his children. And his commitment to Torah way of life, was exemplary. He was every minyan. He was in his high 90s. And every minyan he was there. When I would sometimes be in New York, so I used to make telephone calls to make sure there would be a minyan. I remember once I called him up. He says, "Rabbi, you know, unless there's a special reason that prevents me from coming, I will certainly be there." And that's the way it was. What he said it wasn't just what he said with his words. It's what he did. It was consistent. There was no inconsistencies. And this is the way you keep the Masorah going. You know, different generations might talk different languages, but the language of personal example, that's the same throughout the generations. And Mr. Gutman showed that example, the personal example, both in the way he acted with others, with the devotion to his relatives, and with his commitment to the Torah way of life. And I'm sure that as a result of this linkage to Matan Torah, that he was, for his descendants, will continue for generations to come. Dihiya nafsho tzara b'tzor hachayim.
Asher Yisher Hilo Alach Batzas Shayi B'derech Chati Omad V'Moshav Leisi Lo Yishav. He have so he. I'm sorry, it cut out. Ki b'Toras Adonai Chav so Toras Yega Yom of Alayla V'Hayat Ke'et Shasul Pagimayim Asher Piri Tebet. Be told by Leah Lo Yibal V'Chol Asher Yasi Yatzliach L'Chein Rishai Keep him out Asher Tibet Okay, Lo Yikamu Rishai B'Mishpat B'Chatay B'Adam Tzadikim Ki Yodea Adonai Derech Tzadikim V'Derech Shei B'Aves. Praises for a man that did not follow in the ways of the wicked and did not stand in the way of sinners or in the company of scorners, but his desire was to follow the law of Hashem and his laws. He worked toil day and night. He should be as a tree planted beside the river of water, which will bear fruit in season, and its leaves do not wilt. He's successful in whatever he does. It's not like the wicked who are like chaff in the wind that blow away. The wicked shall not stand up in the judgment, nor shall sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For Hashem knows the ways of the righteous, but the ways of the wicked shall perish. My father was not known for his time sitting in the Beis Midrash day and night. Yet his entire life was devoted and dedicated to the service of Hashem through kindness to others and service to the community. He was dedicated to family. No matter what, when a family member had a need, there was no limit to what he would do. His strength was unlimited. When I speak to extended family about my father, one thing that always comes to mind is that he was always ready to run to the airport to pick someone up or drop someone off at a moment's notice. It was never a question, never an argument. And he always had a smile or a joke. He was there for everyone. He took care of his mother for the many years of her illness. He took care of my mother for all the years that she needed help. And of course, took care of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, no matter how difficult. I don't know where he got the strength. He always had enough. For the greater community, my father organized groups when he was younger. He was part of every organization he could come up, like the Zionist organization. He organized a group. Not so much because, although he did support the causes, not so much because of the causes, but because of the people. He was interested in trying to be there for all the people, all the members, and give them something. I cannot count how many shidduchim he arranged through these groups and through other venues that he had opportunities to do. So always looking out for the next person, no matter if anyone needed help. When he had a stroke last October in the ambulance, the first thing he says to me is, "Who's going to read the Molad on Shabbos before? How are they going to get a minyan?" He was in the midst of a major stroke, and his concern was about the next person. In the ambulance, he apologized to me for having a stroke, like it was his fault, like he owed me an apology. Like most of his siblings, my father was born in Chmelnik, Poland, which he left Poland at a young age when the family moved to Vienna. I don't know very much about his time in Poland. He never talked about what he did when he was in Poland. He only talked about other people, what happened, what was going on. I mean, of course, he talked about walking 10 miles in knee-deep snow both ways to school. But yeah, of course, like everybody else. But he talked about how the house they lived in, and how on one side there was a store, the family business, and the other side there was a shtibel. That was very important to his family, that they should be able to house the local shtibel. He spoke about my grandma, Mama Shi, in the relationship with the local Rebbe, and there's so many stories I can't even go into it. He talked about various stories about his siblings and other family members, but he never talked about himself and his own experience. He was young when he left, but still, something was never talked about himself. In Vienna, he talked about how the family of 9, 10 when his sister Razel was still living, lived in a one-bedroom apartment, in a one-bedroom studio apartment, and how they slept on. His parents took the bedroom, and everybody else slept on chairs or floors or wherever they could find a spot. It wasn't until recent years that he told me a story how his father had invited a guest that he met on a train who needed a place to stay, to live in his house for an unspecified amount of time. And of course, when the guests came, they gave the guest the bedroom, and they all found even more ways to figure out how to fit in the space. He was very proud of how his father, how the chesed his father did, and I'm sure that was one of the incidents that formulated his approach to kindness and chesed for everybody. His name was Chaim, and he approached everybody with Chaim, with grace and when they escaped Austria, during the war, Mamashi put my father and his three sisters on the last kinder transport out of Austria to eventually end up in the relative safety of England. He was, of course, the oldest in the group. He was the man in charge of looking after his three younger sisters. They managed to get to London. They were put in different together at the beginning, but then when the London Blitz occurred, they were moved up to the country and they were moved to different places. What did he do? He spent his time tracking down his sisters, making sure he knew where they were okay, and he took and watched and made sure of that the whole time during that period. There's so many stories. I can't even start to list them all. There's just so many stories. Tell the story of how he helped secure the visas for the family to get to America. The American embassy did not want to let Jews come into America. They made it difficult. There were long lines. There were constant rejects. They sent back the papers and say, "Oh, you missed something. Oh, you do it over, do it again." And after weeks and weeks of this, they were going again in line. And my grandmother, Mama, she saw a door on the side of the building where people were coming and going, and she pushed him towards the door and said, "Go there." He took the papers and he went inside. He wandered around in the American embassy until he somehow managed to find his way to the deputy ambassador's office. The ambassador looked at him and said, "What are you doing here?" He just says, "I want to go to America." He couldn't talk English very well, but and he asked him again. He said, "Who are you?" "I want to go to America." It's basically all he needed to say. So he was 15 years old, but he didn't speak English very well. They were just there a very short time in London. Eventually the deputy ambassador told him to give him the papers. Looked at the papers and he signed off on them, and they had the visas to go to America. When the family, with the help of family in already in America, the family ended up moving to Chicago. And during that time, my father always talked about how the family helped them. They came with absolutely nothing. They were penniless. And they thought they had a business, but it disintegrated in the way there. They had nothing. Family started them out, and they were the family in Chicago that was there was very close with each other because they had what he called the Cousins Club, and the Cousins Club met. I don't know what weekly, monthly. I don't know what the schedule was, but he said because of that, the family was very close, and it became a calling card for my father. It was very important. The family has to stick together. Family is everything. Family is how they survived Europe. Family is how they got it to Chicago. Family is how they established themselves here. It's all about keeping the families together. That was one of his strongest points. In the earlier years in Chicago, he attended the Chicago Yeshiva and was still on the west side. He was hoping to get smicha, but all that didn't turn out. He was going to college a little bit. He was going to have smicha, but he ended up having to stop early because he had to go and help in the family business, this family fur business that they started. Although he didn't leave the yeshiva before he made sure that all of his chavrusas got smicha. Every one of his chavrusas ended up getting smicha. He helped them through that. But unfortunately, he didn't get. And I know that one of the proudest days he talked about was when Rabbi Schwartz gave me smicha. That was a very big deal. Like I said earlier, he was always involved in organizations and shows. There was just so many different things. His life was about other people, never was about himself. He was also very smart. Whenever there was a need, he was the one in the family that would take the test. One of his brothers bought a car, didn't know how to drive. He took the driver's license test. Another time, somebody bought a seat on one of the stock exchanges, so he went and took the stockbroker's test so they could use the seat. Took a real estate license. He took the life insurance license. Whatever he needed to do, he was always the one that did it. He was the one. And this wasn't for himself. He didn't need any of these things. He was doing it to help his family, to help his brothers, to help everybody else. It was always, again, that was his thing, as always other people. When Mama, she had her first stroke, my father was at her side for every meal, every day for 7 years. 7 years. He went to the nursing home or the hospital. He was sure that they didn't just put the meal in and leave it and will come back half an hour later and take it away, which is what he's always worried about. How can she get better if she doesn't eat? He went every meal, day after day for 7 years. I'd helped take care of his care for 7 months. I'm exhausted. I have no idea where he got the energy from for 7 years. And that's not all. When my mother fell and broke her pelvis and she had mobility issues for the rest of her life, I don't know if it was 7 or 10 years, he didn't just take care of her nursing. He didn't want her. He wanted her at home. He took care of her as a sole caregiver. He took care of every need, whether she needed to go to the bathroom, whatever it was he needed, he was there. He cooked. Maybe he cooked mushroom soup all the time, but he cooked. He did whatever he could do. He wasn't a chef. He did what he could do to make sure that she had the energy, that she had the food she needed, that she took care of it. And then he nibbled off the edges. Whatever was left, he nibbled off the plate. And even with all that, during all that time, he was always available to babysit whenever one of the grandchildren needed to be watched. He was there in a minute. He would walk over, drive over. He was there. He always had time, and with all that, he always had time for a smile. He always had time for a joke. His demeanor didn't stop. He was always there. He was always there, and he was always cheerful. He didn't want, even if he didn't feel good, he didn't want to make the next person know that. He was worried about the other person, how they feel. Daddy, I'm sorry if I missed something during the last year, or if I didn't give you proper respect. I felt lost without you. I felt lost without you the whole year. Without your advice, without your assistance. And you never had anything to apologize for. I don't know if I could even come close to the energy and strength that you had for compassion and helping other people. I miss you so deeply now, and I know I'll always miss you. You should know, you raised a wonderful family. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, who always have your example to try and emulate.
Exactly 3 years ago on this day of the Jewish calendar, we stood at this exact spot to bury Mommy. On that day, Daddy lost the love of his life and his reason for being. He never really got over his grief and never really truly enjoyed much in his life afterwards. Some couples refer to their spouse as their better half, but in the case of my parents, they really were two parts of a whole. They completed each other. They were so in sync with each other that I used to lie awake in bed worrying about what might happen if one outlived the other. I couldn't imagine either one living without the other. And that's what makes it so fitting and comforting that Daddy passed away on Mommy's yahrzeit. He just wanted to be with her again. Daddy was a modest and humble man. He never wanted to inconvenience anyone, and he never wanted anyone to fuss over him. He hated being the center of attention, and he would have hated a large funeral. I guess he got what he wanted, a small service with family, because family is what he most cherished. Daddy lived his life on his terms. Until his stroke in October, he lived at home independently. He was set in his ways and refused help of any kind. New shoes and clothing that were bought for him sat in their original packages untouched. Last summer, when I offered to pick him up in an Uber to go out for lunch, he insisted that he pick me up in his car. Yes, at the age of 95, he was still driving. In October, he was so proud of passing his driver's license test, but then a few hours later, he suffered a major stroke. I guess Hashem didn't think he should be driving anymore either. Daddy lived his life for others. He lived for family and for Mommy. He was the one everyone would call when they needed a ride to or from the airport. He devoted his life to making sure the neighborhood shul had a minyan 3 times a day. He dedicated his life to caring for Mommy, especially when she was ill. Daddy loved to schmooze and kibitz and tell jokes, play chess and sing. Last summer, he challenged me to a game of chess and checkers. He beat me in both easily, I might add. and even offered to forfeit his queen to help me out. He was either that good or I was that bad, I'm not sure which. I don't remember a time when Daddy wasn't humming or singing a song, especially a Yiddish song. He would sing a line, translate, then sing another line, and as much as he tried to teach me, and as much as I tried to learn, I never could master the Yiddish songs. I'm grateful that I was able to record him singing them a few years ago. He would be pleased to know that my children now sing some of his songs to their children. His legacy goes on. After his stroke, when Daddy was able to speak, he expressed his desire to go home. Last week, we were able to fulfill his wish, and he was able to return home. Unfortunately, it wasn't for long, but like I said earlier, he lived life on his terms. Daddy once told me that he felt like a failure. While it's true that he never amassed a fortune of money, that's not how I measure success. To me, success is related to legacy. Daddy leaves behind 3 children, 13 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren, and dozens of nieces and nephews who loved him enough to collectively recite the entire Sefer Tehillim over 20 times since October. In my mind, that's a sign of a truly special and successful man. I miss you, Daddy, and I'm glad you finally get to be with Mommy again in Gan Eden.
There are conflicting customs about Saint Del Mole, but my father felt it should be said.
Emali Rachamim, Shochein B'Amromim, Amtsim Nuchon Nechona, Kanfei HaShechina, B'Malos, Kedoshim Torim, Kezor Rakia, Mazirim, Es Nishmas, Avim Mori, Chanina Ben Yaakov Couple, Shalach, Lalamo, Bavur Shenak Mispalim Bad, Skors Nishmaso, Began Eden Tehem, Nuchoso, Lochein, Bala Rachamim, Yastireo, Besesik Rafavli Olamim, Vitzor Betzor Chaim, Es Nishmaso, Adonai Hu Nachalaso, V'Yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'Namar Amen. Gnarly.
You'll help your hands? On the left side. You're gonna help your hands? On the left side. Let's start it. Shovel, we have to wear gloves when you shovel because we're going to be handling the shovel and handling the worker. What?
I'm scared he's gonna fall in.
Your daughter's afraid you're gonna fall in. He said he's not gonna fall in.
He's not the most coordinated.
Yeah, what they calling you?
The wood thing is moving. I don't want him to fall right now.
What thing?
So if you really want to shovel, we ask that you please wear gloves when you shovel.
Oh, there's so many people. Oh, shoot.
if I. Shema Allah Sima Makim Kursi Khadinai. Adonai Shema Bakuli Tenzach Kashavas Kal Tachdinai. Ima Vanoshi Shmo Ya Adonai Mi Yama Kim Khasi Khalaman Tivere. Kivisi keeps on Ashili Rochalti. Nafshil Adonai Shomi Raboker Echel Israel Adonai Kim Adonai Chesed Verbebo Fedus. We've days Israel Mikol Vanosav. Iskadav Iskadash Shemei Rabba. Biamad Rachi was saved and Lichlach was saved. Yatsmach we're gonna be curved cage Shichai. Bechai Chon Yoy Chon Bechai the Chol Beis Israel. Bagal of his man Karib Vimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mavarach Li'alam Me'amaya. Isbarach Vishdabach Vismar Vishamah Visnasei Visadar Visalevis Allah Shmei Dikud Shah Brichu Leila Minkom Bechasav Shirasa Tishbechasav Nechamasa Damiran Riamav Imru Amen Hey Shalom Mitchamai Vachayim Tovi Malenu Bachal Yisrael Vimru Amen I'll say Shalom Bimravav Huya says Shalom Aleinu Bachal Yisrael Vimru Amen.
If we can have the non-mourners form an aisleway on the road leading away from the grave,
stay apart.
we'll just stay a couple, like social distance, sure. And we'll line up on the other side of the tractor. I'd walk around. Otherwise, you're gonna be put 'em up. Walk around. We can all come this way. Let's all come this way.